June 6, 1944, 15 hours. Strong Point WN62, Omaha Beach. Corporal Heinrich Severloh carefully cleaned the barrel of his MG-42 machine gun inside a concrete bunker overlooking the English Channel. In his pocket, he kept a letter from his girlfriend back home in Metzingen, promising to wait for him until Germany's final victory. Just 3 days earlier, he had written to her confidently, "The invasion will be their grave. We'll throw them back into the sea within hours." He had written those words after Field Marshal Rommel himself inspected their defenses. The Desert Fox had peered through Seal's gun sight, studied the overlapping fields of fire, and nodded approvingly. "When they come," Rommel had said, "this beach will be their cemetery." Through the narrow embrasure, Seal saw nothing but calm darkness over the channel. The night was quiet, almost peaceful. Yet within 12 hours, this same young man would be found crying uncontrollably inside his bunker, surrounded by 13,500 spent shell casings and a machine gun barrel warped from heat. Before his eyes stretched an invasion force so immense that his mind could barely comprehend it. Though Seal later claimed he had killed 1,000 to 2,000 men, historians find that impossible. Total American casualties at Omaha Beach were around 2,400. The story of German defeat was not written in strategic reports, but in the shattered memories of soldiers who faced the largest amphibious invasion in human history, from the wrong side of the gun sight. The Atlantic Wall stretched 2,400 miles from Norway to Spain, what Nazi propaganda boasted as the most formidable defense line ever built. Along the Normandy coast, 58 divisions of varying strength. This single strafing, run by 2 planes against an invasion force of thousands, became a symbol of German impotence. The promised knights of the air who would darken the skies over any invasion had been reduced to a futile gesture. At 06:30 hours, the first assault waves hit the beaches. German defenders, despite the bombardment, manned their positions and opened fire. What followed was carnage that shocked even hardened veterans. Heinrich Severloh, the machine gunner at WN62, began firing at 6:35 hours. His position, one of the few undamaged by the bombardment, commanded perfect fields of fire across Omaha Beach. In his 2005 memoir, WN62 Erinnerungen and Omaha Beach, he stated he fired 13,500 rounds over 9 hours. While Severloh claimed massive casualties, military historians note that his position, though deadly, was one of many factors in the Omaha Beach casualties, and specific numbers cannot be verified. What is certain is that his MG-42, firing at a rate of 1,200 rounds per minute in short bursts, contributed significantly to what became known as Bloody Omaha. The German defenders began experiencing what military historians would later term material shock, the mental breakdown caused by confronting overwhelming force. No matter how many Americans, British, or Canadians fell, more appeared. Every destroyed landing craft was replaced by 3 more. Every silenced machine gun position was suppressed by naval gunfire that seemed unlimited. By midday, German positions began reporting critical ammunition shortages. The defensive plans had calculated ammunition expenditure based on repelling a limited assault. Nobody had planned for this scale of attack. According to Wehrmacht supply records, positions that had ammunition calculated for a 3-day battle exhausted their supplies within hours. Artillery batteries, the backbone of the defense, faced similar crises. The carefully husbanded ammunition supplies vanished under the intensity of combat. Attempts to bring forward reserve stocks failed. Every road was under constant Allied fighter-bomber attack. The contrast with Allied firepower was stark. German observers noted that American destroyers would fire hundreds of shells at single targets, while German artillery was rationed to 4 shells per gun per day by the afternoon of D-Day. The German Armor Reserve, the force that RML had insisted must defeat any invasion on the beaches, remained paralyzed through the critical morning hours. The 21st Panzer Division, the only armored unit close to the beaches, did not receive orders to attack until 1,000 hours, 4 hours after the landings began. When the 21st Panzer finally attacked at 16:20 hours, they advanced between British airborne landing zones toward the coast. According to divisional records, they reached the shore between Léonard and Luc-sur-Mer around 1900 hours, the only German armored unit to reach the coast on D-Day. However, at 2100 hours, they witnessed the arrival of Operation Mallard, 250 gliders bringing reinforcements to the British 6th Airborne Division. Interpreting this massive air armada as a threat to their flanks, they withdrew. The division lost 54 tanks and armored vehicles on D-Day, approximately 25% of their strength in a single day. The counterattack also encountered specialized Allied armor they had never seen before. Hobart's funnies, modified tanks with flails for mine clearing, flamethrowers, and bridging equipment, seemed to belong to a different era of warfare entirely. Throughout D-Day, German units faced a threat they had never encountered at this scale: massive airborne forces operating behind their lines. The 6th Airborne Division, British, and the 82nd and 101st Airborne Divisions, American, created chaos that multiplied their actual strength. Aust Friedrich von Ditter, Germany's most experienced paratrooper commander serving with the 6th Falga Regiment, was in Normandy during the invasion. His professional assessment, recorded in post-war interviews, was damning. The Allied airborne operation was everything ours had never been. Massive, coordinated, and supplied. We dropped battalions. They dropped divisions. We were supplied by single aircraft. They had endless streams of gliders and transport planes. The psychological impact of paratroopers appearing everywhere paralyzed German responses. Units refused to move, fearing ambush. Others fired at shadows, sometimes at their own men. The confusion multiplied German problems exponentially. As D-Day progressed, German command and control disintegrated. Allied aircraft systematically destroyed communication lines. French resistance activated by coded BBC messages, cut telephone cables, and destroyed relay stations. Radio communications were jammed by Allied electronic warfare units. General Lieutenant Max Pemmel, Chief of Staff of the 7th Army, attempted to coordinate the defense from his headquarters at Lamar. His war diary records increasing frustration as contact with forward units disappeared. By noon, entire divisions had vanished from the communication network. Individual unit commanders made decisions in isolation without knowledge of the larger picture. As darkness fell on June 6th, surviving German defenders took stock of their situation. The impregnable Atlantic Wall had been breached in multiple places. The Luftwaffe had essentially ceased to exist over Normandy. The Kriegsmarine had managed to sink one destroyer, USS Corey, while losing 15 E-boats and numerous smaller craft. General Lieutenant Wilhelm Rieck, commanding the 716th Division, which had borne the brunt of the British assault, reported to 7th Army headquarters. Division combat strength 35%, all coastal strongpoints lost, artillery 90% destroyed, enemy advancing inland. The statistics told a story of complete tactical failure, despite individual acts of heroism. In a single day, the German forces had suffered casualties equivalent to those of a major battle, while the Allies continued landing fresh troops as if D-Day was merely the beginning, not the climax. Throughout the night of June 6th to 7th, German units attempted to regroup and counterattack. These efforts revealed the full extent of Allied superiority. Every German movement was detected by radar, illuminated by flares, and destroyed by artillery or naval gunfire. Hans von Luck's Panzer Grenadiers, finally released to counterattack, advanced towards Sword Beach in darkness. According to his memoir, they were immediately illuminated by parachute flares and subjected to devastating fire from destroyers offshore. It was like daylight. Every vehicle, every soldier was visible. The shells came from the sea with perfect accuracy. We lost half our strength without seeing a single enemy soldier. Meanwhile, Allied reinforcements continued landing. The artificial Malbury harbors were already being assembled. Supply ships anchored in organized rows. The invasion wasn't just succeeding, it was transforming into a permanent presence. As German reinforcements attempted to reach Normandy, they encountered complete interdiction of movement. Every road, railway, and bridge was under constant attack. According to Wehrmacht transportation records, units that should have reached the front in one day took up to 2 weeks. The 2nd SS Panzer Division, Das Reich, stationed near Toulouse, took 17 days to reach Normandy, a journey that should have taken 3 days. They arrived having lost 30% of their vehicles to air attack, without firing a shot at ground forces. The psychological impact was devastating. If they couldn't even reach the battlefield intact, how could they hope to influence it? Meanwhile, Allied logistics operated with stunning efficiency. LSTs, landing ship tank, discharged entire armored regiments in hours. Within days of D-Day, the Allies were landing 15,000 tons of supplies daily, more than the entire German army in Normandy consumed in a week. By June 12th, German forces in Normandy were approaching psychological collapse. They had lost 26,000 men killed, wounded, or missing, roughly equivalent to 2 full divisions. Replacements were minimal. Command positions fortified with 17 million cubic meters of concrete and 1.2 million tons of steel. Hitler himself had called it impregnable. At Omaha Beach, that confidence seemed justified. According to the U.S. Army's official records, the Germans had built 8 large bunkers, 35 pillboxes, 4 artillery batteries, 18 anti-tank positions, 45 rocket launchers, 85 machine gun nests, and 6 mortar pits. The beach was a death trap. 3,700 obstacles from Belgian gates to Czech hedgehogs and wooden stakes topped with mines littered the tidal zone. Behind them lay 6.5 million mines, though Rommel had demanded 10 times that number. Colonel Ernst Goth, commanding the 916th Grenadier Regiment near Bayeux, had calculated his defensive firepower. His batteries could deliver 120 rounds per minute onto the beaches. Combined with neighboring units, German guns could theoretically annihilate any landing. But these figures assumed endless ammunition, a fatal flaw in their plan. June 5th brought stormy weather that Luftwaffe meteorologist Walter Stuba in Paris had deemed impossible for an invasion. Winds howled at 25 knots, waves climbed to 6 feet, and clouds hung at 500 feet. Stuba, using U-boat and weather station data, assured High Command that bad weather would last for 2 weeks. Confident in his forecast, many senior officers left their posts. Rommel himself departed for Germany to celebrate his wife's birthday, carrying a pair of gray suede shoes he'd bought in Paris. General Friedrich Dollmann, commanding the 7th Army, ordered his division leaders to attend war games in Rennes. Even naval patrols were canceled due to rough seas. This misplaced confidence was Germany's first fatal mistake. Unbeknownst to Stuba, the Allies had weather stations in Greenland and reconnaissance flights over the Atlantic that spotted a brief 36-hour calm. Group Captain James Stagg identified this crucial window, and Eisenhower seized it. At 23:15 on June 5th, radar operators along the Norman coast detected unusual signals. Freya and Würzburg sets picked up massive formations approaching from the north. The Germans dismissed them. They'd seen similar readings before from Allied diversion raids. But by 00:30 on June 6th, the situation changed. Reports flooded in. Paratroopers were landing all across Normandy. Some units said they were British, others claimed American. Dummy paratroopers with firecrackers, part of Operations Titanic and Rupert, deepened the confusion. Major Hans von Luck, commander of the 125th Panzer Grenadier Regiment, was one of the first to realize the truth. Woken by reports of paratroopers near his positions, he requested permission to counterattack. Division HQ replied, "Do not move until the situation clarifies." Von Luck later wrote in his memoir, Panzer Commander, "At that moment I knew we were lost. Every minute we waited gave them time to dig in, but we were paralyzed by our own command structure." June 6th, 05:30 hours. As dawn broke, German observers finally saw something their training had never prepared them for. From horizon to horizon, the sea was covered in ships, and not dozens, not hundreds, but thousands. Battleships, destroyers, landing craft, an armada spreading across the channel like a gray carpet. The official Allied record lists 6,039 vessels, Lund 213 warships, 4,126 landing craft, 736 support vessels, and 864 merchant ships. It was the largest naval invasion in history. For German defenders raised on propaganda about Allied weakness, the sight was shattering. Artillery officer Bernhard Furking, later killed that day, reportedly told his men, "We are watching the whole world land on our doorstep." At 05:35, the naval bombardment began. Nothing in the defenders' experience, not the Eastern Front, not even the worst RAF raids, compared to this. The battleship USS Texas fired 255 14-inch shells at Pointe du Hoc in just 34 minutes. HMS Warspite, the first ship to open fire that morning, fired over 300 15-inch shells in the first 2 days. The bombardment crushed German fortifications that had been believed indestructible. Concrete bunkers split open, men were buried alive, dug out, and buried again. The Atlantic Wall, once a symbol of Nazi pride, crumbled like sandcastles under the fury of Allied fire. The Luftwaffe's response revealed Germany's desperation. Oberst Josef Pieps Priller, commander of Jagdgeschwader 26, received orders to attack the invasion fleet with his entire force. His reply, recorded in the unit's war diary, was grimly simple. What entire force? I have 2 planes. On D-Day, the Luftwaffe launched only 319 sorties against 14,674 Allied flights. Priller and his wingman Heinz Wodarczyk made the only German air attack on the beaches that morning, strafing Sword Beach once in their FW-190 fighters, before fleeing from overwhelming Allied air power. Meanwhile, Allied strength grew by the hour. On June 12th, Carentan fell, connecting Utah and Omaha beaches. The German paratroopers of the 6th Fallschirmjäger Regiment, elite troops who had never before retreated, were forced to withdraw in disarray. Their commander, Friedrich von der Heide, reported to headquarters, "My regiment no longer exists as a combat unit. The survivors are psychologically broken." On June 13th, SS Obersturmführer Mikkel Wittmann earned one of the few German tactical victories in Normandy. According to British records, he destroyed 13 to 14 tanks, 2 anti-tank guns, and 13 to 15 personnel carriers during the Battle of Villers-Bocage in just 15 minutes. German propaganda quickly seized on this moment, presenting it as proof that German forces could still turn the tide. But this victory actually highlighted the hopelessness of Germany's situation. Wittmann's disabled Tiger tank was extremely difficult to replace. The British, however, replaced their destroyed vehicles within hours. No individual brilliance could compete with Allied production power. Wittmann, who had 138 confirmed tank kills on all fronts, was killed on August 8th when his Tiger tank was destroyed. Whether it was by British gunner Joe Ekins of the Northamptonshire Yeomanry or Canadian forces is still debated. The Wehrmacht's greatest tank ace fell to an enemy that could afford to trade 10 tanks for 1 Tiger. The fall of Cherbourg on June 26th delivered another psychological blow. This heavily fortified port, defended by 21,000 men and expected to hold out for months, fell after just 5 days of intense fighting. Lieutenant General Karl Wilhelm von Schlieben, who had vowed to defend the city to the last bullet, surrendered instead. After the war, he admitted that resistance was pointless against an enemy with virtually unlimited resources, a sentiment echoed throughout German accounts of Normandy. Operation Cobra, launched on July 25th, delivered the knockout punch. According to official U.S. Army Air Force records, the preparatory bombardment involved 503 heavy bombers, 380 medium bombers, and 550 fighter bombers, dropping more than 4,100 tons of bombs on a narrow area, just 7,000 yards wide and 2,500 yards deep. Lieutenant General Fritz Bayerlein, commanding Panzer Lehr Division, reported to Army Group B, "My division is annihilated. The psychological effect on the survivors is indescribable. They are no longer soldiers, but broken men. The bombing was so powerful that it even killed." Lieutenant General Leslie McNair, the highest-ranking American officer to die in the European theater, while he was observing from what was believed to be a safe distance. If American generals weren't safe from their own firepower, what chance did German soldiers have? From August 12th to 21st, the Falaise Pocket became the graveyard of German forces in Normandy. Allied intelligence, later confirmed by German records, reported about 10,000 German soldiers killed and 50,000 captured. Over 300 tanks and armored vehicles and 2,500 other vehicles were destroyed. Survivors described roads littered with burning wrecks and dead horses. Allied fighter bombers struck every 20 minutes. Artillery never stopped. The destruction was so overwhelming that many German troops simply surrendered rather than face certain death. By the end of the Normandy campaign, German losses between June 6th and August 31st reached approximately 320,000 men, 30,000 killed, 80,000 wounded, and 210,000 missing or captured. They lost 2,300 tanks, almost all their armored forces in France, and 2,127 aircraft. Allied losses were far lower, around 29,000 killed, with replacement troops exceeding daily losses. They lost roughly 4,000 tanks, replaced within weeks, and 411 aircraft from a total force of more than 13,000. This massive disparity revealed the core reality of the war. Germany was fighting a war of attrition. It could not win against an enemy with overwhelming reserves. German officers later gave blunt assessments. General Hans Eberbach, who took command after Rommel was wounded, reported to OKW on August 1st. "The enemy's material superiority is at least 20 to 1 in artillery, 10 to 1 in tanks, and absolute in the air. He replaces all losses in days. We replace nothing. We could replace nothing. General Hans Speidel, Rommel's chief of staff, later wrote in his 1949 memoir, "Normandy proved that courage alone could not overcome industrial supremacy. We faced an enemy who had mechanized not just warfare, but victory itself." Field Marshal Erwin Rommel left perhaps the most powerful reflection on the Normandy experience. In his final report to Hitler on July 15th, 2 days before he was severely wounded by Allied aircraft, he wrote, "The troops are fighting heroically everywhere, but the unequal struggle is nearing its end. The enemy's overwhelming superiority in men and material is beginning to tell. I must ask you to draw the necessary conclusions without delay." In the careful language of military command, Rommel was admitting total defeat. Germany's most respected field commander was telling Hitler that the war was lost. The Normandy campaign exposed a hard truth. World War II had become a war of production. German soldiers came face to face with the scale of American industry, something beyond their comprehension. Ford's Willow Run plant alone built one B-24 bomber every 63 minutes at peak output. In 1944, American factories produced 96,000 aircraft. The Allies fired more ammunition in a single day than Germany could manufacture in a month. One U.S. division consumed more supplies daily than an entire German corps. General Hans von Luck later reflected, "We learned that modern war was not about tactics or courage, it was about production." The Americans had turned war into an industrial process. They manufactured victory on assembly lines. The Germans who survived Normandy were changed forever. They had witnessed the collapse of everything they had been taught about warfare, racial superiority, and destiny. Heinrich Severloh, the machine gunner of WN-62, spent the rest of his life haunted by D-Day. In his 2005 memoir, he wrote about meeting American veterans. "We all realized we had been young men thrown into an industrial slaughterhouse. My 13,500 rounds meant nothing against their endless replacements." Friedrich von der Heydte, the paratrooper commander, later became a professor of international law. He wrote, "Normandy taught us that the age of warrior heroes was over. War had become a matter of industrial capacity, and we had challenged the world's greatest industrial power with horses and outdated dreams." From the German perspective, D-Day was not just a military defeat, it was an ideological and psychological collapse. Soldiers who had conquered most of Europe discovered that everything they believed about their enemies, their cause, and their capabilities was catastrophically wrong. They had expected weak, divided democracies. Instead, they faced an alliance that had transformed war into a precise industrial system of overwhelming efficiency. They saw democracy's arsenal in motion. Countless ships, planes, tanks, and supplies flowing from factories whose capacity defied belief. The German defenders of Normandy learned that modern war was won not on battlefields but in factories, not by the bravest soldiers, but by the most productive societies. The Allies had turned warfare into mathematics, where production numbers mattered more than tactical skill. Heinrich Severloh began June 6th believing the invasion would be crushed within hours. He ended it surrounded by empty shell casings, watching endless waves of Allied troops landing on the beaches his gun was meant to defend. His experience symbolized Germany's wider tragedy in Normandy, tactical brilliance drowned by strategic impossibility. The beaches of Normandy became more than a battlefield. They became a revelation. German soldiers saw the future of war, and it belonged to nations that could build more faster. The Wehrmacht had brought courage, discipline, and training. The Allies brought limitless production. Against that, bravery meant nothing. They fought until their barrels melted, until their ammunition was gone, watching the Allies simply bring more of everything. The cold mathematics of industrial warfare rendered their courage irrelevant. The Germans who faced D-Day learned history's harshest lesson. In an age of mechanized war, nations that couldn't match their enemy's production were doomed to lose, no matter their soldiers' skill or sacrifice. They began June 6th as warriors of the Third Reich, and ended it as witnesses to the arsenal of democracy in full, terrifying force. Their defeat was not merely military, but total. It was the final collapse of the Nazi illusion of racial and military superiority, shattered by the overwhelming reality of Allied industrial power. The invasion they had sworn to drive back into the sea had instead swept them away, along with the last illusions of German victory.